If you've ever been underestimated because of how you look or a snap judgment someone made about you, you'll want to hear this story to the very end. I was sitting in that glass-walled conference room at Valcourt Advisory Group, watching Heather Moreau, their HR director, dismiss my entire career with a condescending smirk. She actually said I was embellishing my experience leading multi-million-dollar deals. Then the door opened, and everything changed in an instant. My name is Samantha Holt, and at 39, I'd spent the better part of 2 decades building a reputation in international market strategy that should have spoken for itself. But there I was, sitting across from Heather Moreau in Valcourt Advisory Group's intimidating downtown office, watching her flip through my resume with barely concealed skepticism. "So, Ms. Holt," Heather said, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the mahogany table. "You claim here that you led the European expansion for Meridian Tech that resulted in a $280 million revenue increase." She looked up at me over her designer glasses. "That seems ambitious for someone of your background." I kept my voice steady, though my hands clenched in my lap. "It's not a claim. I have the documentation, references from the CEO, and—" "I'm sure you do," she interrupted, that patronizing smile never leaving her face. "But you have to understand, we see a lot of candidates who tend to inflate their contributions, especially when they're eager to join a firm of our caliber." The words stung more than I wanted to admit. I'd rehearsed this interview a dozen times, prepared every possible answer, wore my most expensive suit, the one I'd bought after closing the Santiago deal. Yet here I was, being dismissed like some desperate job seeker padding their resume. "I understand your concern," I began, reaching for my portfolio. "If you'd like to see the quarterly reports from—" "That won't be necessary." Heather waved her hand dismissively. "We prefer to evaluate candidates based on their presence and cultural fit. And frankly, Ms. Holt, I'm not seeing the executive presence we're looking for. Your experience seems more regional than global." Regional. The word hung in the air like an insult. I'd negotiated deals in 12 countries, navigated complex cultural landscapes from Sao Paulo to Singapore. But to her, I was just another mid-level manager trying to play in the big leagues. "With all due respect," I said, feeling my professional calm beginning to crack, "I've managed portfolios worth more than—" The conference room door swung open without warning. Heather's irritation flashed across her face before she turned to see who dared interrupt her interrogation. "Victor." Her entire demeanor transformed in an instant, shifting from dismissive gatekeeper to eager sycophant. "We weren't expecting you today. I'm just finishing up with a candidate." "Samantha?" The man in the doorway, Victor Lane, as I'd soon learn, stared at me with genuine surprise and delight. "Samantha Holt, what are you doing here?" I recognized him immediately, though we'd only met twice during the Grandstone Global restructuring. He was older now, silver streaking through his hair, but still carried himself with the quiet authority of someone who'd built an empire from scratch. "Mr. Lane." I stood, extending my hand. "It's good to see you again." "Good to see me." He laughed, crossing the room in 3 quick strides to shake my hand with both of his. "Heather, do you have any idea who you're sitting with? This woman saved my company from bankruptcy. The Brazilian market analysis she did, revolutionary. We were bleeding money until she identified the cultural disconnect in our approach." Heather's face went through a spectacular range of emotions: confusion, disbelief, and finally, a dawning horror as she realized her mistake. "Not just Brazil," Victor continued, seemingly oblivious to the tension in the room. "The entire South American expansion. We went from near closure to $400 million in new revenue within 18 months. All because Samantha saw what none of our other consultants could see." He turned back to me. "Tell me you're not here for a job interview. Tell me you're here to take over their Latin American division." "Actually," I said, allowing myself a small smile as I watched Heather's face drain of color, "I'm here for a senior strategist position." "Senior strategist?" Victor looked at Heather like she'd lost her mind. "You're interviewing Samantha Holt for a senior strategist position? Do you know how many companies would kill to have her as a partner? Hell, I've been trying to poach her for years. He focused on me again. If you're really looking for a new opportunity, I'll double whatever they're offering, triple it, just say yes. The room fell silent. Heather's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, her earlier condescension evaporating into panic. Of course, Victor added, glancing at his watch. I'd prefer if you joined Valcourt. They're our primary consulting firm, and I'm about to sign a massive contract with them. But honestly, I'm reconsidering that decision if they can't recognize talent when it's sitting right in front of them. He looked pointedly at Heather. No offense, but maybe you should let someone else handle the recruitment for strategic positions. Clearly, evaluating executive presence isn't your strong suit. The conference room felt smaller after Victor left, his parting words still echoing. Samantha, whatever you decide, give me a call. My offer stands. The door clicked shut, leaving Heather and me in a silence so thick you could cut it with a knife. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt exhausted. This was the 68th interview in 8 months, and I was tired of proving myself to people who'd already made up their minds about me before I walked through the door. Well, Heather cleared her throat. Her entire demeanor transformed. The dismissive gatekeeper was gone, replaced by someone desperately trying to salvage a situation spiraling out of control. That was quite an endorsement. Perhaps we should revisit your qualifications. Perhaps we should, I said, settling back into my chair. But I knew nothing had really changed. I was still the same person with the same experience I'd walked in with 20 minutes ago. The only difference was that someone important had vouched for me. This wasn't new. It was the story of my entire career. I grew up on a dairy farm in Vermont, the kind of place where success meant keeping the farm running another generation. College wasn't a given. It was something I earned through countless nights stocking shelves at the local grocery store and tutoring kids in math. I started my career at a no-name firm in Boston, taking any project that would teach me something new. Nobody handed me anything. Every skill, every connection, every victory was hard-won. I learned Portuguese by listening to language tapes during my commute. I studied market reports until my eyes burned. When others went to happy hour, I was analyzing cultural trends in emerging markets. By 35, I was leading international expansions for major corporations. By 37, I was the vice president of strategic development at Brightcore Innovations, managing a team of 40 and a budget that would have bought my family's farm 1,000 times over. Then Brightcore got acquired. The new CEO, a guy named Derek who probably couldn't find Brazil on a map, came in with his own team. All men, all from his previous company, all with the same narrow view of what success looked like. Within 3 months, every female executive was gone. Restructuring, they called it, streamlining operations for synergy. I got a decent severance package and a glowing recommendation letter that meant nothing when the people reading it had already decided I wasn't the right fit. 8 months. 67 interviews. Everything from startups to Fortune 500 companies. The feedback was always the same, wrapped in different corporate speak. Impressive but not quite right. Overqualified. Cultural mismatch. Or, my personal favorite, we're looking for someone with a different energy. Ms. Holt? Heather's voice pulled me back to the present. She'd been talking, and I hadn't heard a word. I was saying that we'd like to fast-track you to the final round. I can arrange for you to meet with our CEO tomorrow. I appreciate that, I interrupted, gathering my things. But I need some time to consider my options. Her face went through another transformation, from eager to panicked. Of course, but I should mention that we're prepared to make a very competitive offer. Senior strategist with a clear path to partnership. I'll be in touch, I said, standing. I was done being evaluated by people who couldn't see past their own biases until someone else told them what to think. Done pretending that the next interview would be different. Done believing that merit alone would be enough. That night, I sat in my one-bedroom apartment, a far cry from the penthouse I'd given up after Brightcore, staring at my phone. 3 missed calls from Heather, 2 from Valcourt's CEO, 1 from Victor Lane. There was also a text from Monica Hale. Heard about your interview today. Small world. Coffee tomorrow? I have an idea. Monica. Another casualty of the Brightcore acquisition. Former head of data analytics. Brilliant mind, pushed out in the same restructuring that got me. We'd stayed in touch, bonding over our shared experience of being erased by mediocre men who thought leadership looked like them. I texted back, the coffee lab on 5th, 10 a.m. Whatever Monica wanted to discuss. It had to be better than accepting a position at a company that only valued me when someone else forced them to see my worth. I'd spent my entire career building other people's empires. Maybe it was time to consider building my own. The next morning, Heather's emails had multiplied like rabbits, each one more desperate than the last, progressing from professional courtesy to barely concealed panic. The final one, sent at 11:47 p.m., simply read, "Please, Samantha, let's discuss this opportunity properly." I deleted them all and headed to the coffee lab. Monica was already there, looking more energized than I'd seen her since our Brightcore days. She wasn't alone. Next to her sat Riley Mason, another familiar face from the conference circuit, a digital transformation specialist who'd made waves by helping traditional retailers compete with Amazon. Samantha. Monica stood, pulling me into a hug. Thanks for coming. You remember Riley? Of course. I shook Riley's hand, curious about this impromptu gathering. Though I'm wondering what brings the three of us together. Revenge, Riley said bluntly, then laughed at my expression. Kidding. Sort of. Monica told me about your Valcourt interview. The one where Victor Lane had to vouch for you before they'd take you seriously. News travels fast, I muttered, settling into my chair. In our industry. Please. Heather Moreau called half of HR Boston trying to figure out how she missed your connection to Victor. Monica pulled out her tablet. But that's exactly why we need to talk. How many times have we been in rooms where our ideas were dismissed until a man repeated them? How many strategies have we developed that made millions for companies that couldn't see our value until it was gone? She was right. It was a pattern I'd watched play out countless times. Not just with me, but with every talented woman I knew who'd climbed high enough to threaten the status quo. What are you proposing? I asked. Riley leaned forward. Monica and I have been discussing this for months. There's a massive gap in the consulting market. Every major firm uses the same playbook. Harvard MBAs, McKinsey methods, one-size-fits-all strategies that completely ignore local contexts and cultural nuances. They treat emerging markets like they're just America with different languages, Monica added. Remember the Brightcore disaster in Peru? They lost $30 million because they didn't understand the significance of local relationship building. I remembered. I'd written a 20-page report outlining exactly how to avoid that disaster. Derek had thanked me for my input and then ignored every recommendation. So we start our own firm, Riley continued. One that actually values diverse perspectives. That understands markets aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet, but living, breathing cultures with their own rules. With what money? I asked, though I was already calculating my severance balance. Between the three of us, we have enough for 18 months of runway. Monica said, I've run the numbers. Small office, minimal overhead, focused on quality over quantity. We each bring our own clients initially, and I know we all have people who'd follow us. She was right about that. I'd gotten calls from former clients asking where I'd landed, disappointed when I said I was still looking. Victor Lane wasn't the only one who'd valued my work. He was just the most vocal about it. What would we call it? I asked, surprising myself by speaking as if I'd already decided. Aurora Strategies, Riley said. New dawn, new approach. Plus, it sounds established, professional. I thought about Heather's frantic emails, about Valcourt suddenly discovering my value only after Victor Lane endorsed me, about 67 interviews where my experience meant nothing until a man validated it. When do we start? I said. Monica smiled. I've already got us a meeting with Fernandez Exports next week. They're looking to expand into Asian markets but want someone who understands their Latin American roots. Told them I might know someone perfect for the job. The resignation email to Valcourt was surprisingly easy to write. Professional, brief, thanking them for their time and consideration. I sent it that afternoon, then turned off my phone. 3 days later, when I finally checked my messages, I had 18 missed calls from Valcourt, a lengthy email from their CEO expressing his deep disappointment, and a terse message from Heather that barely concealed her fury. This is highly unprofessional. We restructured our entire offer to accommodate you. No, I thought. You restructured your entire perception of me because someone important told you to. There's a difference. Our first Aurora Strategies meeting was in Monica's living room. 3 laptops, a whiteboard, and enough caffeine to fuel a small army. We divided responsibilities based on our strengths. I'd handle client strategy and business development. Monica would lead research and analytics. Riley would manage digital transformation and operations. No hierarchy beyond what makes sense for each project, Riley insisted. We're partners, equal stakes, equal voices. And no Heather Morose, Monica added. We hire based on talent and potential, not pedigree. I raised my coffee mug. To Aurora Strategies, may we blind them with our brilliance. And our results, Monica added, and our revenue. Riley finished. We clinked mugs, 3 women who'd been told we weren't the right fit, preparing to build something better than anything that had rejected us. The Fernandez Exports meeting was our proof of concept. Carlos Fernandez, a second-generation owner who'd built his family's coffee export business into a multi-million-dollar operation, sat across from us in his Boston office, skepticism written across his weathered face. Every consultant promises the moon, he said, his accent still thick despite 30 years in America. McKinsey wanted $2 million to tell me what I already know, that Asia likes coffee. You 3, forgive me. But what makes you different? I'd prepared for this moment. Instead of launching into a PowerPoint, I pulled out a bag of his company's coffee. This is your Colombian single origin, right? The one that failed in Japan last year? His eyes narrowed. How do you know about that? Because I know why it failed, I said, pouring the beans onto the table. You marketed it the same way you market in America. Bold, strong, wake up and conquer the world messaging. But Japanese coffee culture isn't about conquest. It's about precision, ritual, moments of contemplation. Monica picked up seamlessly. Your competitors who succeeded there didn't just translate their marketing, they transformed it. Look. She showed him data on her tablet. Same product, different story. Yours could be positioned as the perfect coffee for Ma, the Japanese concept of pause between actions. We're not just consultants, Riley added. We're translators, not of language, but of meaning. Carlos leaned back, a slow smile spreading across his face. My daughter. She keeps telling me I need to understand these things. Maybe I should listen. He looked at each of us. What would you need to begin? Our first project, our first victory. Within 3 months, Fernandez Exports had not only entered the Japanese market but secured partnerships with 2 major hotel chains. Carlos became our champion, introducing us to other business owners who'd been burned by big firms that didn't understand their unique challenges. The wins came faster after that. A textile manufacturer looking to expand beyond traditional markets, a tech startup needing to navigate European data regulations without losing their agility. Each client brought new challenges, and we met them all. 6 months in, we'd outgrown Monica's living room. The office we rented was small, a converted loft in Cambridge, but it was ours. We hired our first employee, then our second. Both women who'd been overlooked by traditional firms. Both brilliant. We need to be careful, Monica warned during one of our partner meetings. We can't scale too fast or we'll become exactly what we're fighting against. She was right. We turned down more clients than we accepted, focusing on those where we could make a real difference. Quality over quantity became our unspoken mantra. Then came the invitation that changed everything. The Global Strategy Summit was the industry's premier event. Speaking slots were coveted, usually reserved for partners at major firms or CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. Somehow, Aurora Strategies had made the list. They want us to present on alternative approaches to market expansion. Riley read from the email. 40-minute slot, main stage, day 2. Yup, that's right after Valcourt's presentation on traditional excellence in modern markets. Monica noted, trying not to smirk. I felt a flutter of something. Not quite anxiety, not quite excitement, vindication, maybe. We'll need something spectacular. This is our chance to show the industry there's another way. We spent weeks preparing. Our presentation wasn't just about our methodology. It was about challenging every assumption the consulting world held sacred. We used our clients' stories, with permission, to show how understanding culture could unlock opportunities invisible to those who only saw spreadsheets. The morning of the summit. I stood in front of my hotel mirror, adjusting the blazer I'd bought with Aurora's first profit distribution. My phone buzzed with a text from Carlos. Knock them dead, mija. You've earned this. The conference hall was packed. I spotted familiar faces from my corporate past. Some who'd interviewed and rejected me, others who'd stood by while I was pushed out of Brightcore. And there, in the third row, sat Heather Moreau with Valcourt's entire leadership team. Ready? Monica asked, joining me at the side of the stage. Beyond ready, I said. We took our positions as the announcer introduced us. Please welcome the founding partners of Aurora Strategies, a firm that's redefined market expansion through cultural intelligence, Samantha Holt, Monica Hale, and Riley Mason. The applause was polite but curious. We were unknowns on a stage usually reserved for industry titans. That was about to change. 18 months ago, I began, looking directly at the audience. The three of us were told we didn't fit the traditional consulting mold. Today, we're here to tell you why that mold is broken. The presentation flowed like water. Monica's data visualizations showed how cultural misunderstandings cost companies billions annually. Riley demonstrated our digital tools that mapped cultural contexts alongside market opportunities. I tied it together with real stories, real results, real revenue. 40 minutes felt like 4. As we concluded, the audience erupted. Not polite applause, genuine enthusiasm. People were taking photos of our slides, typing notes furiously. Then, from the middle of the crowd, a familiar voice called out. I have a comment, Victor Lane said, standing. The room fell silent. Or rather, a confession. Grandstone Global was failing in South America. We'd hired 3 different major firms, spent millions on strategies that looked perfect on paper but failed spectacularly in practice. Then we worked with Samantha before Aurora existed. And she showed us what we were missing. Not market data, understanding, respect, connection. He turned to address the room. I'm announcing today that Grandstone is moving all our international consulting to Aurora Strategies. Not because they're cheaper or faster, but because they're right. And if any of you are smart, you'll be calling them before this conference ends. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, like a dam breaking, the questions started. Business cards appeared from everywhere. My phone vibrated constantly with messages and connection requests. Through it all, I caught Heather's eye. She sat frozen, her face a mask of professional composure barely containing her shock. The CEO beside her was whispering urgently, probably calculating how much business they'd just lost. That was, Riley breathed as we finally escaped backstage. The beginning. Monica finished. This is just the beginning. Aurora Strategies' first real break came not from a grand pitch or a high-profile introduction, but from a quiet referral. It was a rainy Thursday morning when Samantha received a LinkedIn message from Daniel Price, a mid-level strategy manager at Kensington Dynamics, a consumer electronics company she'd advised during a workshop years before. I heard you started your own consultancy. The message read, We've been pushing for market expansion in South America. But our current consultants say the timing isn't right. I remembered how you always found angles others missed. Any chance you'd be open to a small project? The timing was perfect. Kensington wasn't a giant account, and the budget Daniel proposed was modest. But Samantha recognized what this was: a door opening. She replied instantly, setting up a meeting for the following week. When Samantha, Monica, and Riley arrived at Kensington's sleek downtown office, they were greeted by a room of polite skepticism. Daniel had managed to get them in front of the product strategy team, 8 executives in crisp suits, arms crossed, faces unreadable. Samantha led the presentation, walking them through Aurora's philosophy, real market entry strategies built from the ground up, starting with cultural dynamics, not just spreadsheets. They presented a pilot assessment showing overlooked opportunities in 3 specific regions in Brazil, Paraguay, and Colombia, markets where Kensington's competitors had failed due to standardized Western-centric approaches. For 40 minutes, the room remained quiet. Then, one of the vice presidents, a sharp-faced woman named Allison Becker, leaned forward. "We've been debating this for months. You just put hard data behind everything our on-ground teams have been trying to explain." The ice broke. Questions flew in. The energy shifted. By the end of the session, the team wasn't just interested, they wanted a formal proposal. The project was greenlit within 2 weeks. Aurora poured everything into it. Samantha worked side by side with Monica, who built a dynamic market model highlighting cultural buying behaviors and regional economic triggers. Riley layered in digital transformation insights, showing how Kensington could leapfrog competitors by aligning their strategy with emerging tech trends unique to those markets. 3 weeks later, when Samantha presented the final recommendations, Kensington's leadership didn't just approve the strategy, they invited Aurora to oversee its phased implementation. That single project sparked a ripple effect. 2 referrals came within the month, both from executives who'd sat in on the Kensington presentation. The budgets were slightly larger, the scope of work more ambitious. By the end of the 4th month, Aurora had grown beyond anyone's cautious optimism. They hired 2 junior analysts and moved from working at Monica's converted attic to a shared office space in a refurbished textile mill in the heart of the city's startup district. The office was small but had high ceilings, exposed brick, and enough natural light to make every meeting feel like a fresh start. Samantha insisted on one rule from day one. Every client project had to combine data precision with human nuance. No templated reports, no cookie-cutter strategies. And it worked. By the end of their first quarter in business, Aurora's projects were producing measurable growth for clients, numbers that began to catch the attention of industry insiders. But the real turning point came with a phone call from an unexpected source. Yara Mason, a former digital transformation lead at Brightcore, reached out after hearing about Aurora's rise. "I've been watching you shake up the market," Yara said, her voice warm but direct. "I'm tired of sitting on the sidelines. If you're looking for a partner who knows how to scale this, I'm in." With Yara's expertise in digital strategy and tech platforms, Aurora's offering expanded overnight. It wasn't long before Samantha got the invitation, the one she hadn't even dared to dream of during those sleepless nights months ago. An industry conference, Global Market Strategy Summit. Aurora was invited to present on the secondary stage, a slot no new consultancy ever landed without years of pedigree. The topic they pitched was simple but provocative: invisible markets, identifying growth opportunities everyone else overlooks. Samantha knew this was their shot, not to prove anything to Valcourt, not even to prove something to herself, but to stake Aurora's claim as a force the industry couldn't ignore. The Global Market Strategy Summit was a spectacle Samantha had only ever watched from the sidelines, a gathering where industry giants flaunted their latest theories and boutique firms rarely made it past the attendee list. Yet, there she stood, backstage with Monica and Yara, glancing at the modest-sized secondary hall that was rapidly filling beyond capacity. Aurora's presentation wasn't designed to provoke. Samantha had carefully crafted it to showcase real case studies, markets that traditional firms had deemed too volatile or culturally mismatched, where Aurora's nuanced strategies had unlocked significant growth. As Samantha took the stage, she met a sea of curious eyes, Industry veterans, skeptical consultants, and even a few executives from rival firms filled the room. She began not with numbers, but with a story. 3 months ago, a client dismissed the potential of the Colombian market based on outdated risk models. Our data revealed consumer segments no one was tracking, a market that grew 18% in 6 weeks after launch. She walked them through the layers of cultural insight, localized strategy, and data-driven risk analysis. The room, initially polite, leaned in as she moved from case to case. When she opened the floor for questions, Samantha expected polite inquiries. Instead, a familiar voice echoed from the middle of the room. How confident are you that these models consistently outperform traditional projections? Samantha's heart stopped. Victor Lane stood up, arms crossed, a slight challenge in his tone. But his eyes held something else, the unmistakable glint of opportunity. Our models have consistently delivered between 20 to 40% above traditional benchmarks. Samantha replied, her voice steady, and we have the client outcomes to prove it. Victor nodded slowly, a smile playing at the corner of his mouth. They do indeed. Your strategy saved my company last year. I'm curious, why didn't you take the offer from Valcourt Advisory? I recommended you to them personally. A murmur rippled through the room. Samantha knew this was the moment. She smiled lightly. I decided to pursue a different opportunity, one where results speak louder than pedigree. Victor gave a short, approving laugh. Their loss, and apparently a significant one. He turned to the crowd. My team is shifting our entire Latin American strategy to Aurora. If anyone's smart, they'll be doing the same. It was as though the air changed. By the time Samantha stepped off the stage, attendees were queuing for introductions. Reporters hovered, scribbling down notes. Rival consultants whispered in hurried clusters. But nothing struck Samantha harder than the pair of eyes she met across the crowded hall. Heather Moreau, standing rigid beside Charles Goddard, CEO of Valcourt Advisory. Heather's expression was pale, her gaze fixed on Samantha with a mixture of disbelief and brewing resentment. Victor approached Samantha again, this time with Charles and Heather trailing reluctantly behind. Samantha, I want you to meet Charles. Victor said loudly enough for nearby conversations to pause. I've just informed him that Grandstone Global is transitioning its full consultancy portfolio to Aurora. Samantha extended a professional hand. A pleasure, Mr. Goddard. Charles's handshake was firm but strained. I've heard impressive things, Charles said stiffly. Perhaps we should explore ways our firms can collaborate. Samantha held his gaze. Aurora is open to partnerships that respect independent vision. Heather opened her mouth, likely to interject. But Victor spoke first. I've already suggested several colleagues take a serious look at Aurora. You'll be hearing from them. And with that, he gave Samantha a meaningful nod and disappeared into the throng. As Heather and Charles huddled together, whispering urgently, Samantha felt a calm certainty settle over her. This wasn't a victory built on pettiness or revenge. It was validation, in front of an entire industry that had once written her off. And this was only the beginning. 6 months passed, and Aurora Strategies wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. Client after client came on board, many of them introduced by contacts who had attended Samantha's summit presentation. The firm expanded to 20 employees, a diverse mix of strategists, analysts, cultural consultants, and digital architects. They worked from a sunlit office in a restored warehouse on the city's west side. An open, collaborative space that reflected everything Samantha believed a consultancy should be. But the real test came in the form of a familiar rival, Valcourt Advisory. 3 months after the summit, word reached Samantha that Valcourt had launched a new division, Valcourt Emerging Markets, positioned as a bold venture into culturally nuanced market strategy. Samantha didn't even blink when she read the headline. Until Monica burst into her office later that morning, tablet in hand. You need to see this, Monica said. On the screen was an interview in a major industry journal. The new division was being headed by none other than Heather Moreau. Heather, quoted extensively, spoke of the need for fresh perspectives, of integrating local cultural insights into market strategy, almost word-for-word echoes of Aurora's founding vision. Samantha read the article twice. Heather's language wasn't just similar, it was practically lifted from Aurora's website. "She's trying to clone us," Monica said. "And with Valcourt's resources, they'll undercut our pricing, offer a watered-down version of what we do for cheaper." By the end of the week, the threat became real. Nisha Mason, their newly appointed director of client strategy, brought alarming news to their Monday meeting. "Valcourt's reaching out to 3 of our biggest clients. They're offering 30% lower rates for comparable services." Samantha remained silent for a moment, tapping her pen against the table. "Let them." Riley blinked. "You're serious?" "They can copy our language," Samantha said calmly. "But they can't replicate our thinking or our team, and they'll never understand the heart of our methodology. They'll fail trying to mimic what they don't believe in." But even as she spoke, Samantha knew she couldn't afford complacency. Aurora had to stay ahead, redefine the game before Valcourt could catch up. The solution had been brewing in the background for months. A proprietary assessment framework Samantha and Nisha had been quietly developing, a system designed not for market analysis, but for identifying overlooked talent. Where other firms relied on credentials, Ivy League degrees, and pristine resumes, this framework used scenario-based challenges, cognitive flexibility assessments, and collaborative simulations to evaluate candidates on real-world capability. It was Aurora's bet that companies were losing billions by filtering out brilliant minds who didn't fit conventional molds. "We can't just help companies see overlooked markets," Samantha told her team. "We have to help them find overlooked people, the ones who'll transform those markets." They accelerated the project. What was supposed to be a 6-month rollout condensed into 6 frantic weeks of development, testing, refining, and validating with select clients. The first test case stunned everyone. A mid-sized tech firm looking to expand into Eastern Europe piloted the assessment on a batch of applicants their traditional hiring filters had already rejected. The framework identified 3 candidates the company would have never considered. Within their first 2 months on the job, those hires outperformed existing teams on innovation metrics by nearly 40%. Word spread fast. Aurora wasn't just leading market strategy now. They were redefining how companies built the teams that made those strategies work. Valcourt had tried to imitate their methods, and now they were already 2 steps behind again. Samantha didn't just want to win clients. She wanted to reshape the industry. And Heather Moreau? She could chase Aurora's shadow all she liked. Because by the time Valcourt realized what game they were playing, Aurora would already have rewritten the rules. The message arrived on a Wednesday morning, short, formal, and entirely unexpected. Valcourt Advisory requests a meeting with Aurora Strategies to discuss a potential acquisition. Samantha read it twice before sliding her phone across the conference table to Monica and Nisha. "So, they've come knocking," Monica said, raising an eyebrow. "I wonder how much of this is Heather's idea," Nisha added. Samantha leaned back in her chair, the corners of her mouth curling slightly. "Let's find out." They scheduled the meeting for the following Thursday at Valcourt's glass-clad headquarters downtown. Samantha arrived early, accompanied by Monica and Imani Brooks, Aurora's legal counsel. The reception they received was predictably polished. A smiling assistant ushered them into a boardroom large enough to host a summit. Charles Goddard, Valcourt's CEO, greeted them with calculated warmth. Beside him sat Heather Moreau, her expression as unreadable as a closed book. "Samantha," Charles began, "we're impressed by what you've built. Aurora has captured market attention in ways few thought possible. We see a future where your methodologies and our global reach could create something exceptional." Heather nodded slightly, as if granting her approval from a throne of superiority. "We're prepared to offer a generous acquisition package," Charles continued. "Your team would be integrated into our emerging markets division, and, naturally, you would assume a senior leadership role within Valcourt's structure." Samantha kept her smile neutral. "Reporting to?" "Heather," Charles confirmed smoothly. "As head of strategy and integration." Monica shot Samantha a glance, but but Samantha didn't flinch. Before we discuss numbers, Samantha said, opening her folder, I'd like to outline Aurora's conditions for even considering this acquisition. She slid the documents across the table. Heather skimmed the first page, and her expression darkened. You're proposing complete operational autonomy for Aurora? Heather asked, voice clipped. Correct, Samantha replied calmly. Independent leadership, hiring authority, and strategic direction. Charles flipped through the pages, his frown deepening. You also want to establish a new department focused on inclusive talent acquisition, with the power to override existing recruitment processes? Exactly. The same framework that's delivered proven results for every client we've worked with. Heather set her copy down, her smile thin and brittle. This proposal essentially restructures Valcourt's entire talent acquisition approach. It transforms it, Samantha answered, into something that works. The room went silent. Charles exhaled slowly. We'll need to discuss this internally. Of course, Samantha said. Take all the time you need. 3 days later, Charles returned, this time alone. Valcourt agreed to most of Aurora's terms. The board, swayed by undeniable performance data and mounting industry pressure, overruled Heather's objections. Aurora would operate independently within Valcourt's ecosystem. Samantha would report directly to the board on the Inclusive Talent Initiative. Heather would have no oversight over Samantha's team. The acquisition was announced a month later. Industry headlines raved about the unconventional deal, how a nimble startup had rewritten the terms of engagement with a legacy giant. But for Samantha, the defining moment came on her first day at Valcourt's headquarters post-acquisition. Before the all-hands presentation, Heather approached her backstage. I may have been wrong about you, Heather admitted, her tone cool but edged with something almost human. But this doesn't mean I agree with everything you're pushing. Samantha met her gaze steadily. You don't have to agree. The results will speak for themselves. Heather gave a faint, hollow smile before turning away. Later that morning, Samantha stood before hundreds of Valcourt employees, the new face of a transformed future. We've confused credentials with capability, she told them. Pedigree with potential. Today, that ends. The applause started slow, then grew. And as Samantha stepped down from the stage, locking eyes with Heather in the front row, she knew the real victory wasn't in winning a negotiation. It was in changing the rules of the entire game.